Let's take a look at solving a quadratic equation when factoring won't work. Here we've been given the equation x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0 to solve. As before, when we were solving by factoring, we first must have everything on the same side with 0 on the other. We already have that here, so it's a good start. Now, I would always want to look to see if I can factor this first, but this one won't factor. The only factors of 1 would be 1 and 1. That doesn't add up to the 3 that we need in the middle. If we cannot make something factor, then the second way for us to solve an equation with a degree of 2, a quadratic equation, is what is known as the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula says that we can get the solutions for x by doing the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times ac, all of that over 2a. Now that may seem a bit overwhelming when you first hear it, but once you identify what each of the letters will be, it's really not so bad. A is the coefficient of the x squared term. For this problem, it's going to be understood to be a 1 that is the coefficient of that x squared. B is the coefficient of the x. Signs are part of it. So for this one, b is negative 3. And c is the constant value, so c for this one is 1. Now, as we substitute into our formula tells us do the opposite of b. What is the opposite of negative 3? It's positive 3. Plus or minus the square root of, take b and square it. When you take negative 3 and you square it, that would go here. The next part of our formula says minus 4 times a was 1, and then times c, which was also 1. So we've substituted the 1 for a and the 1 for c. Then the bottom of our formula says 2 times a, 2 times 1, just going to be a 2 that's on the bottom here. Let's simplify the things that we have inside the radical. Negative 3, when you square it, made 9. Negative 4 times 1 made negative 4, and it was all over that 2 that we had seen before. Now up underneath this radical, those things will combine. 9 minus 4, that gives me 5. The fact that this is not a perfect square confirms for us that we were not able to work this problem simply by factoring. We had to do it with the quadratic formula. Now, you'll recall that things that have a degree of 2 are supposed to have 2 solutions most of the time. Do we have 2 solutions here? We do indeed. One is 3 plus the square root of 5, all of that over 2. The second answer is 3 minus the square root of 5, all of that over 2 as well. Here's another quadratic equation for us to try to solve. When I first look at it, having that leading coefficient that's a 2 makes it maybe difficult for us to factor. If you can't figure out how to factor it, or if it won't factor, then you can use the quadratic formula to get the solutions for anything that has a degree of 2. All we've got to do is get everything to the same side with 0 on the other. A is the coefficient of the square term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is the constant value. Here again is our formula, so let's substitute the things where they go. Our b was 3. The opposite of 3 is negative 3. Plus or minus the square root of b when you square it. 3 is being squared. Then minus 4 times 2 times 1 back on the back. All of this is over 2a, 2 times 2 on the bottom. Let's simplify the arithmetic that we've got. Still a minus 3 out in front, plus or minus. 3, if you square it, made 9, and negative 4 times 2 times 1 is negative 8. All of this is over 4. Now, inside that radical, 9 minus 8, that's 1. So 1 is a perfect square. This tells me if I had just realized it, I could have made this thing factor if I had tried. But it doesn't matter. It's still going to give us the right solutions. The square root of that 1 is 1. So I end up with minus 3 plus or minus 1 all over 4. Now again, I'm expecting two solutions. One of the solutions, let's do the minus part first. One of the solutions, minus 3 minus 1, made negative 4 over 4. That's negative 1 for a solution. The other solution, if we do negative 3 plus 1, negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 4, that simplifies to being negative 1/2. So we did get two solutions. When you're solving something with a degree of 2, you first need everything on the same side with 0 on the other, and you should always try to factor first. If it'll factor, great. If it won't, or if you just don't know how to make it factor, then you can use the quadratic formula to get your solutions. A is the coefficient of the square, B is the coefficient of the x, and C is the constant value. Substitute into the formula and do the arithmetic that results.